It is just this universally recognized, almost physical sensation. You are walking into a room.
Oh, absolutely. That immediate wall of energy.
Right. Maybe it's a hotel ballroom, the ones with that aggressively patterned carpet.
Huh.
Or maybe it's a rented-out restaurant space with terrible acoustics. Or honestly, maybe it's just a corporate conference room that they've slightly rearranged to look less like a place where people get fired and more like a place where people, mingle.
Well, they just push the tables to the walls and add some lukewarm coffee.
Exactly. But you walk in and you hear the low hum of 50 or 100 different conversations happening all at once. You hear the clinking of ice and glasses, the sudden bursts of that really loud performative laughter, and suddenly it hits you. You're going to have to introduce yourself to someone.
To a total stranger.
To a total stranger. And not just introduce yourself, but you have to somehow justify your presence in that room. It is a terrifying moment for a lot of people. I mean, honestly, the expectation of precision in that specific moment is completely overwhelming.
Well, it is entirely overwhelming because if you think about it, the physical environment itself is hostile to natural human connection.
Yeah, makes sense.
Your cortisol levels are spiking. The noise level forces you to lean in awkwardly, and you are just hyper aware of your own physical presence. I mean, we often treat professional introductions like they should be this clean mechanical process, right?
An algorithm.
Exactly. You input your name, your job title, your company, and you expect the output to be a perfect professional connection. But human beings are not vending machines.
Thank goodness.
Right. The reality of walking into a room full of professionals is incredibly nuanced, and it's governed by these unwritten social rules that, honestly, most of us only learn by completely failing at them first.
Which is why today we are doing a deep dive into a short lesson, specifically on professional introductions. And I know, on the surface, the concepts in this material are pretty basic. We all know what an elevator pitch is.
Sure, it's a buzzword everyone knows.
Yeah, and we all know we're supposed to ask questions. But the text we are looking at today isolates a very specific high-stress scenario. It's about introducing yourself cold. And that is something that almost everyone struggles to execute cleanly when the pressure is actually on.
It really is.
So our mission for this deep dive is to bypass all the usual generic networking advice. We want to focus entirely on the hidden mechanics of human interaction. Because whether you are prepping for a massive industry conference or you just want to feel like less awkward at your local Chamber of Commerce meeting, knowing what to say is completely useless if you don't understand why the stranger's brain is reacting the way it is.
Right. And to map out exactly what we are covering from the source material today, there are really three core elements we are extracting. First, mastering what the text calls a simple elevator pitch.
Emphasizing the word simple there.
Yes, very heavily. Second, understanding the mechanics of polite follow-up questions. And third, we're going to apply both of those tools to a very specific high-stakes scenario involving two individuals from the lesson, Mia and Bruce.
Which is such a relatable scenario. So let's start right there. Let's look at the environmental pressure of the scenario provided in the source. Mia takes Bruce to a business mixer.
Right.
And this immediately establishes a very specific interpersonal dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mia is acting as the bridge. She is the facilitator here.
She's the one with the access. She has the social capital or the invitation or the membership that's required to even get into this environment. Bruce is essentially her plus one.
Right. She's the one with the golden ticket. She knows the layout. She knows the players.
But the critical detail in the source is what happens next. The text explicitly states that Bruce is forced to introduce himself to a stranger.
Ah, right.
So the ultimate burden of execution falls entirely on him. And this highlights a profound and I think often misunderstood professional reality. Access does not equal connection.
That is such a huge distinction.
Right. I mean, Mia can open the door. She can walk him past the registration desk. She can't even physically place him in the center of the room right by the chafing dishes. But that access does not guarantee a successful connection. Bruce is entirely responsible for closing that gap.
It is a lot like a parent taking off a child's training wheels.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, Mia's running alongside the bike. She's holding the seat, providing that initial forward momentum so Bruce doesn't just tip over the second he walks through the double doors. She gets him past the initial friction of entering the room.
And that friction is very real.
It's massive. But at some point, Mia lets go of the seat. She gets pulled into a conversation with a former client or she goes to get a drink. She steps back. And suddenly, Bruce is moving forward facing this total stranger, and he has to pedal.
He's on his own.
Exactly. If he doesn't know the mechanics of balancing that conversation, he's going to crash. Hard.
And think about the psychological shift that happens in that exact moment. When you walk in with Amia, you borrow her confidence. You are shielded by her halo effect.
Yeah, people are nice to you just because of proximity.
Exactly. The people she talks to will smile at you simply because you're standing next to her. But the second she walks away, that borrowed credibility just evaporates.
Poof, gone.
You are suddenly exposed, the temperature of the room drops, you are no longer Mia's colleague, you are just a person occupying space, and you have to prove your value from absolute zero.
But wait, let me push back on this for a second. If the ultimate goal here, the whole point of this source, is to make a meaningful professional connection, isn't introducing yourself completely cold to a total stranger the absolute worst, least effective way to do it?
How do you mean?
Well, I mean, if the goal is the art of the professional introduction, shouldn't Mia be making the introduction? Isn't that the entire point of bringing a +1? A warm handoff is always going to yield a better result than a cold approach, right?
Well, in a perfect, highly controlled environment, yes. A warm introduction from Mia provides immediate borrowed credibility. The stranger trusts Mia, so by extension, they temporarily trust Bruce.
Right, it's a shortcut.
It is. But relying entirely on warm introductions creates a massive vulnerability in your professional skill set. If your entire networking strategy relies on a Mia constantly holding your hand, hovering over your shoulder, and vouching for you, you are basically a passive participant in someone else's network.
You are building your own.
Exactly. You aren't building your own, you are just a passenger. The text uses this specific scenario to illustrate that the true test of your ability, the actual art of the introduction, is the ability to function independently of your facilitator.
Because, I mean, you can't control what Mia does. You can't control if she gets cornered by someone she hasn't seen in 10 years and is trapped for an hour.
Exactly. You can only control your own execution, and the cold open is the crucible. It is the hardest possible variation of the introduction.
It really is the boss level.
It is. If you can master the mechanics of walking up to a stranger who has zero prior context for who you are and successfully initiate a meaningful dialogue without making it awkward, every other type of networking becomes effortless. It builds a core conversational resilience.
So Bruce is stranded. The training wheels are off. He is coasting toward a total stranger who is holding, like, a miniature quiche or something, and he desperately needs a tool to break the ice.
Right.
He opens his mouth to speak. But if he overcomplicates it, he loses them immediately. How does he construct a pitch that actually hooks a distracted brain?
Which leads us directly into the source's first major highlight, right? The simple elevator pitch.
Yes, and we really need to look closely at that word, simple.
Why is that word so important?
Because everyone knows the concept of an elevator pitch. The problem isn't a lack of awareness, it's a lack of execution. Under pressure, our instinct is to do the exact opposite of simple. We over-explain.
Oh, guilty.
We all do it. We feel this intense, burning need to justify our presence in the room, so we try to cram 10 years of career nuance into a 30-second monologue. It's like imposter syndrome manifesting as verbal diarrhea. You walk up to someone, and suddenly you're reciting your entire LinkedIn profile, including, like, your summer internship from 2015, just because you're terrified they won't think you're important enough to talk to.
It is entirely driven by ego and anxiety. But we have to look at this interaction from the stranger's perspective. The stranger in this room is dealing with massive cognitive load.
Cognitive load, meaning just how much their brain is trying to process at once.
Exactly. They have been at this mixer for an hour. They are processing the loud ambient noise. They are trying to remember the names of the 5 people they just met.
Which is impossible, by the way.
Basically impossible. Plus, they are worried about an email they need to send to their boss. And on top of that, their feet probably hurt. Their mental bandwidth is almost completely maxed out.
Their brain is essentially a hard drive that is 99% full. If you try to download a massive complex file into that brain right then, the system is going to crash.
That is a perfect way to put it. When Bruce walks up and delivers an overcomplicated, jargon-filled description of his daily workflow, say, he goes, "Hi, I'm Bruce. I leverage synergistic paradigms to optimize cross-functional deliverables in the B2B SaaS space."
I've heard that exact pitch before.
We all have. But when he does that, he is presenting a puzzle. He is demanding that the stranger expend precious mental energy to decipher what he just said. And in a high-stress, low-stakes environment like a mixer, the stranger simply won't do it.
The stranger's eyes just glaze over. They physically nod. They might even say, oh, wow, interesting, but mentally, they have completely left the building.
They are actively looking over your shoulder for an exit route.
Exactly.
An overcomplicated introduction is actually a form of social selfishness.
Wow. Social selfishness. That is a strong way to frame it.
It really is, though, because it prioritizes your need to sound impressive over the listener's ability to actually comprehend what you're saying. A simple pitch, on the other hand, is an act of empathy.
Empathy for their full hard drive.
Right. It respects the chaotic environment, and it respects the stranger's depleted mental bandwidth. It provides clear, easily digestible hooks that require zero cognitive strain to process.
So I like to think of it like the cover of a book. If you walk into a bookstore and you pick up a novel, the cover doesn't have the entire plot printed on it in tiny 6-point font.
That would be a terrible cover.
It would be absurd. It doesn't list every character arc, every twist, and the underlying thematic symbolism. The cover just has a compelling title, a striking image, and maybe a one-sentence tagline.
Right.
The goal of the book cover isn't to tell you the whole story. It's just to get you to open the book and read the first page. That's what a simple elevator pitch is doing. It's the cover of Bruce.
That's exactly it. The pitch is merely the invitation to engage. It is not the entirety of the engagement itself. You are just trying to get them to turn the page.
But let me challenge that for a second. If Bruce strips away all the nuance and all the complex details that actually make him uniquely good at his job, doesn't he run the risk of sounding totally generic?
In what way?
Well, if he just says, "Hi, I'm Bruce, I work in software sales." I mean, that's simple, but it's incredibly boring. In an effort to be simple and avoid overwhelming the stranger, don't we sacrifice the uniqueness required to actually nail the impression?
And this is exactly where most people fail at the execution of this tool. They confuse simple with simplistic.
Okay, break that down for me.
Saying I work in software sales is simplistic. It provides the category, but it provides absolutely zero intrigue. It is a conversational dead end. The stranger hears it, categorizes Bruce in a mental filing cabinet labeled sales, and the interaction just stalls out.
Because there's nothing to grab onto.
Exactly. The art of the pitch is finding the tension between simplicity and curiosity.
So how do you build that tension? What is the actual difference between simplistic and simple but intriguing?
It really all comes down to framing. Instead of stating your job title, you state the problem you solve.
Okay, the problem you solve.
Right. If Bruce says, I work in software sales, the stranger has no natural follow-up other than, oh, what kind of software? Which honestly feels like work to ask.
It feels like an interview.
It does. But if Bruce says, I help logistics companies figure out why their delivery trucks keep running late, and I build software to fix it,
Oh, that's good.
that is still exactly one sentence. It is incredibly simple. There is zero jargon, but it presents a tiny narrative. It has a protagonist, which is the logistics companies, a conflict, the truck's running late, and a resolution, the software.
It naturally pulls the listener in. The brain hears a problem and instinctively wants to know more about the solution. It practically invites the stranger to say, oh, really? Why do the trucks run late?
Exactly. You are planting a very specific seed. If the pitch is too dense, it shuts down the stranger's brain. If it's too simplistic, it fails to spark any reaction at all. The sweet spot is a simple, digestible statement that functions as an open door.
It gives them an easy win.
Yes, it gives the stranger an easy, obvious question to ask next without making them feel stupid or confused.
Okay, so let's play this out in the real world. Bruce walks up, he respects the room, he respects the cognitive load of the stranger, and he delivers that perfect, simple, problem-solution pitch. He has successfully presented the book cover.
He nailed part one.
He nailed it. But an elevator pitch, even a flawless one, is inherently one-sided. Bruce is just broadcasting information about Bruce. He cannot just drop his simple pitch and then stand there staring at the stranger in absolute silence, waiting for applause.
Oh, and the silence that follows a static pitch is just excruciating.
It's the worst.
It is the moment where most networking interactions actually die. People think the goal is just to deliver the information cleanly. They view the pitch as the finish line.
Right, like, I did my part, now you go.
Exactly. But the pitch is just the starting gun. The first impression is absolutely not finished the moment Bruce stops talking about himself.
Because if you stop there, you're essentially treating the other person like a microphone. You speak your piece, and now you're done. The spotlight has to move.
It has to pivot entirely. The initial pitch establishes your baseline value, but the impression is cemented by how you transition the focus over to the stranger.
And this brings us to the final key highlight from the source material, the polite follow-up questions.
Yes. The mechanism for that pivot is the polite follow-up question. Without the question, it's a monologue. With the question, it actually becomes a dialogue.
And when Bruce asks that follow-up, he's basically triggering a psychological rule of reciprocity, right?
He is.
He has just made himself slightly vulnerable by pitching his identity to put himself out there. By immediately pivoting to a question, he gives the stranger a safe, controlled way to match that vulnerability. It shifts the dynamic from a performance into a partnership.
It completely signals to the stranger that Bruce is not just some narcissistic broadcasting tower. He is acknowledging their presence in the room. He is recognizing that they also have value, they also have a story, and he is actively curious about it.
It disarms them.
It completely disarms that defensive posture that people take when a total stranger approaches them.
It's like a game of tennis.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Yeah, think about it. The elevator pitch is the serve. Bruce tosses the ball up. He hits it over the net. It's a clean serve. It lands right in the service box. But if you serve the ball and then just stand there on the baseline with your racket hanging down, staring blankly at the other person, the game is over.
It's super weird.
Right. The silence is the ball bouncing past them. If you don't hit the ball back over the net with a follow-up question, the rally dies immediately. You have to give them something to swing at.
And the quality of the return determines the lifespan of the interaction, which actually brings us to the most delicate part of the lesson here.
Oh, the word polite.
Yes. The text doesn't just instruct Bruce to ask questions, it specifically mandates polite follow-up questions. And in the context of a cold introduction at a business mixer, the definition of polite is very rigid.
Right, because what exactly constitutes polite in this scenario? Politeness to my best friend is very different from politeness to a stranger holding a warm glass of white wine at a Marriott.
Exactly. Politeness in this specific environment is entirely about calibrating the weight of the question. You have to understand the boundaries of early-stage professional interaction.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, a polite follow-up question shows active interest without demanding a high cognitive or emotional tax from the stranger. It's about lowering the barrier to entry.
So what happens if Bruce serves the tennis ball, but it's actually a bowling ball? Like, what's a poorly calibrated question?
Oh, there are so many traps here. If Bruce finishes his pitch and immediately asks, "So, exactly how much revenue did your department generate last quarter?"
Oh, wow. No.
Right. Or, "Are you planning on leaving your current company soon because of the recent layoffs?" Or even something overly philosophical like, "What is your ultimate career trajectory?"
Those are heavy questions.
They are massive. They might be appropriate for a deep mentorship lunch or a closed-door boardroom strategy session, but at a mixer with a total stranger, they violently violate the social contract.
They're interrogations, not invitations. You are making the stranger do way too much heavy lifting right out of the gate. They have to certainly process proprietary data or evaluate their life choices just to keep a casual conversation going.
And their immediate instinct will be to defensively shut down and look for an escape.
Because it's too much pressure.
Way too much. A polite follow-up question asks for context, not confidential data. It allows the stranger to reveal as much or as little as they want. It respects their autonomy.
So what should Bruce ask instead?
Instead of asking about revenue, Bruce could ask, "What kind of projects are keeping you busy lately?" Or, "What brings you out to this particular mixer today?"
Those are so much better.
They are open-ended, low-stakes invitations. The stranger can answer with a one-word brush-off if they don't want to talk, or they can launch into a 5-minute story about their passion project. Bruce is handing them the steering wheel.
And the context of the room matters so much here, doesn't it? Like, if they're at a conference for cybersecurity, the question needs to relate to the shared environment. Like, which of the keynote speakers are you most excited to see? You don't serve a tennis ball and then suddenly ask to play golf. The question has to feel earned by the interaction that just preceded it.
And that actually leads to the biggest trap in this entire process, which we really need to address.
The robot trap.
The robot trap. Because we are breaking this down into a very mechanical 2-step sequence today. Step 1, deliver simple pitch. Step 2, deploy polite follow-up question.
Right. And if I am Bruce, or if I'm listening to this deep dive right now, the danger is that I get so hyper-focused on executing this formula perfectly that I completely stop acting like a human being.
Exactly.
If I just run a conversational algorithm, if my face is totally blank, my tone is flat, and I'm just checking off boxes in my head,
Hmm.
isn't the stranger going to feel that? They're going to feel like they're being processed by a chatbot.
Oh, they absolutely will. Human beings possess an incredibly sensitive radar for inauthenticity. If you treat these tools as a rigid robotic script, the stranger will feel processed rather than seen. It will feel entirely like a transaction.
Like, hello, human. I have inputted my simple pitch. I am now querying your professional status. Please output data.
Yes. And that defeats the entire purpose of the exercise. The structure we are discussing, the pitch, the calibrated question, these are just the scaffolding.
The scaffolding, I like that.
The art of the introduction is making the invisible scaffolding feel organic. It's the tone of your voice, the warmth in your eye contact, the slight pause before you ask the question that makes it feel like it just occurred to you naturally, rather than something you memorized in front of a mirror this morning.
Right. The tools keep the conversation from crashing, but the humanity you bring to the delivery is what actually creates the connection.
Beautifully said.
Well, we have extracted a surprisingly deep psychological journey from this short source text. I mean, we started by looking at the sheer environmental pressure of the room itself.
The pressure cooker.
Yeah, the pressure cooker. Mia brings Bruce to the mixer, providing the physical access, but she abandons him, leaving the ultimate execution entirely on his shoulders.
The training wheels came off.
And we recognize that surviving that cold open environment requires a specific tool, the simple elevator pitch. Not a dense, overwhelming resume that crashes the stranger's mental hard drive, but an intriguing book cover that presents a problem and hints at a solution.
Setting the hook.
Setting the hook. And critically, we unpacked the absolute necessity of the pivot. The realization that nailing the first impression requires moving the spotlight off of yourself immediately.
You have to hit the tennis ball back.
Using a low-stakes, polite follow-up question to trigger reciprocity and hand the steering wheel over to the stranger.
It is a concise but honestly incredibly demanding roadmap for navigating what is often a very messy, anxiety-inducing human experience. You are establishing a clear baseline context of who you are while immediately pairing it with a respectful, non-threatening curiosity about who they are.
And these mechanics are universally applicable for you, the listener. Keep them in your back pocket. Whether you are prepping for a massive, high-pressure conference where you're going to meet hundreds of people over 3 days, or you are just casually networking at a neighborhood event where you don't know anyone, the discipline of a simple pitch and the empathy of a polite follow-up will always keep the bike upright.
But there is a secondary layer to this that we have to consider before we wrap up.
Okay, lay it on me.
We have spent this entire time breaking down how to actively construct the perfect professional introduction. We have talked about crafting the simple pitch, calibrating the polite questions, essentially building this highly polished, highly functional persona designed entirely to optimize a first impression.
Right.
We are wearing a conversational suit of armor.
Sure, to protect ourselves in the pressure cooker.
Exactly. But consider this. If nailing the first impression requires this carefully crafted, simple pitch and these tightly controlled, polite questions, at what point in the life cycle of a professional relationship do you finally drop the elevator pitch persona?
Oh, wow.
When do you allow the messy, complex, unscripted reality of your work, your failures, and your actual personality to take over?
When do the training wheels finally come off for good and you just ride?
That's the real question.
We'll leave you to ponder that dynamic the next time you walk into a crowded room, hear the clinking glasses, and realize you need to introduce yourself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.